The following program is brought to you in living color on NBC.
Good morning. This is today, Wednesday, December 1st, and these are the headlines. Heavy new fighting is reported in East Pakistan. And Premier Golda Meir of Israel is in Washington, hoping, it is said, to get more American jet warplanes. And the enemy has renewed its attacks against the Cambodian army. Frank Blair will bring us up to date on all of this in just a moment. I'm Frank McGee. Barbara Walters and Joe Garagiola are with us this morning. Full crew. In this first half hour, we'll be talking about some important archaeological work being done in Illinois as scholars search for evidence of Indian life dating back many thousands of years. And in the latter half of the hour, Barbara, you'll be talking with some people from Iran?
Yes, at the time of the 25th, 100th celebration of Iran, obviously a great deal of attention was drawn to that country, and it pointed out the dissatisfaction with some Iranians studying and living in this country, and we are having them on today to present their side and to try to give us some insight into why they are so unhappy with the present regime.
Well, we'll get to all that as time goes on. Now we turn to Frank Blair. Say, Frank, what's going on in the world? Archaeologists have been digging into America's prehistoric past for many years. And for the past 3 summers, an archaeological team has been digging up the remains of several Indian villages in Illinois, villages that date back to thousands of years before Christ. And the head of the team is Dr. Stuart Struever, Associate Professor of Archaeology at Northwestern University. NBC News reporter Jim Ruddle talked with him in Chicago.
Good morning, Dr. Struever. We perhaps first off should determine where this is that we're talking about, this Koster Archaeological Site, and what it is.
This is in the middle Mississippi Valley, Jim, 270 miles southwest of Chicago, about midway in the Mississippi Valley from Minneapolis to New Orleans.
As we see here on this map, just north of St. Louis.
Right. In fact, close enough to St. Louis that you can smell the smoke of the industries of St. Louis.
This is Kampsville. Is that the site near?
This is our permanent research headquarters. That building you just saw in the background was our little museum. There's the Illinois River, just as the steamboats used to ply it. And there's the ferry boat that takes us to the Koster Site every day, takes us home after a hard day's work. No bridge across the river, and that's kept modern man.
So we're looking toward the site now.
Right, from Kampsville towards the site. And that's the story of Illinois, the corn, which was here in Illinois, we now know, by 2000 BC, but man didn't grow it for 3,000 years after that. An interesting point. Here we are on the east side of the valley, and up a little gravel road, and Theodore Koster's house comes into sight here. And for years, Mr. and Mrs. Koster lived here, not knowing they had one of the most important ancient sites right there in that little field behind their house in North America. That little valley.
You're digging right in their backyard then. And
immediately in their backyard. They can sit on the back porch and swing a bit and watch us dig, which they do all the time. Here's the big excavation. Every bit of dirt goes through those big table screens.
Well, what are those striations in the earth there?
That black layer you see there is an ancient village that dates to 2500 BC, and the reason it's dark-colored like that, full of those pieces you see, animal bone, mussel shell, spear points, axes, is because of their organic waste, their rotting organic waste. Now here they're removing a human skeleton. You can see there's the leg bones that she's working on now, the lower legs. She's working right at the feet now. This is the skeleton of a modern man, just like you and I. There it is. The legs drawn up against the body. You see the feet right there now. 4,500 years old, beautifully preserved. It's a deep site. You're down at the bottom of a deep hole in that last shot. And at the bottom of that hole, a tiny infant, 18 months old, being carefully put into a cement jacket by an expert from Oklahoma. Look at the depth there, right?
How far down is that?
That's about 29 feet.
Now, how old is this infant?
Weaning age, about 18 months.
And how old is it in chronological years as far as archaeological years?
7,000 years ago, 5,000 BC.
5,000 BC.
Really one of the earliest remains of man that's ever been discovered.
And this is a burial, is it not?
That's right. This is a purposeful burial of a little baby who's died, covered with red pigment, which is an interesting thing because you see that kind of custom all over the world happening among people independently, one from another.
That about the same time or at different times?
At different times in different world areas.
I noticed the girls working there. Who are the workers on this project?
There are students from all over the U.S., even high school students that we recruit as I travel around the country looking for people who want to become archaeologists. Now here's this little infant, Jim, that's carefully being raised on a pulley with a cement jacket around it. Nothing has been touched, coming up through the layers of earth as they were deposited over the 7,000-year period to the ground surface, and then eventually to the Kampsville Museum.
How many different levels are there that you have got to so far?
So far, we found the ruins of 11 ancient communities dating from 5,000 BC to 1,000 AD, about 6,000 years of life in this one site.
Is there a possibility that there's something even older than that?
We know there is, Jim. We know that at 34 feet, 5 feet deeper than we've so far dug, that there is a 12th community, but it's underwater. It's below the water table. We can't touch it until we can find a way to lower the water table, which is, to us, a difficult thing to do.
And here's that infant up in the light.
This gentleman in the background is an archaeologist from the Gilcrease Foundation in Tulsa, Oklahoma. That gentleman probably has excavated more human remains than any living human being in the world, an archaeologist that has spent his life studying man as a biological organism. Now, this is being taken out by us so it can be shown to the visitors in our museum in the little town of Kampsville. We have the smallest archaeological museum in the world.
You have other things there. You have your laboratory set up in Kampsville. What are some of the specialized techniques that you apply to this excavation?
Well, the problem with archaeology, you dig a lot of stuff up and they never get it studied. And so what we've done is establish a zoology lab, a botany lab, a computer lab, two other labs. One is a malacology lab, a snail.
Now, what's a malacology lab?
Well, it's snails.
How does that apply to archaeology?
Well, snails have a very narrow range of environment they can live in, so that different species are characteristic of different environments. Studying the snails allows you to study man's environment through the 6,000 years they lived on Koster Site. Now, this is interesting because most of the snails are not recovered on the site. We've been throwing them away or losing them for years. The woman that's pulled that tag off of that student is my wife, who's been with me on these expeditions for 16 years. There's no private life. She and I have one life. It's all archaeology. They're taking the little tiny remains there out of the creek from those baskets you see. And we would collect these little snails for years and been throwing these away.
Now, the snails tell you climate changes and
vegetation patterns which reflect animal populations. In other words, man is an animal. He has been adapting to the environments of North America, and we need to know those environments if we're going to understand his culture that he used to adapt to these environments.
You've got a couple of things here that were taken from the Koster Site. What's the large black object?
Jim, this is a obsidian spear. It's about 2,000 years old, dug up in a tomb in Illinois that dates to about 1 AD or so. The interesting thing about it is we now know the obsidian was imported from a particular deposit in Yellowstone Park. The chemical trace elements in here are indicative of that obsidian.
And you say imported, that almost sounds like an economic move of some sort, that there was a trade involved. Is this a suggestion you're making?
There is a trade involved, involving, for example, this other item. This is a conch shell from the Gulf of Mexico or the Atlantic coast on central Florida, coming all the way up into Illinois. Obsidian from Wyoming, mica from Appalachian Mountains, copper from Lake Superior.
How old or how long ago was that placed in the Koster Site?
About 2,000 years ago, exactly 2,000.
So there was trade of some sort between the lower Illinois River and the Gulf of Mexico as far back as that?
Yes, in fact, exactly. In fact, we know now there was trade as early as 2,500 BC spanning much of the United States. You see, one of the interesting things, Jim, is we have thought that these people were very simple people. They weren't. They were a very complex society with elaborate trade relationships. This is something we're just discovering now.
Well, do people, when you talk about archaeology, do they turn up their noses at American archaeology? Do they think you should be out digging up gold masks of pharaohs and things of that sort, treasure hunting?
Yeah, they do sometimes. And the difficulty with that is it's hard to dispel these kind of treasure hunting concept of archaeology. And the first thing they say to me is, you mean to say there was early man in Illinois? That's the first thing they always say to me.
Most important thing, I guess, now is what happens next. Can you continue digging that?
No, we can't continue digging at Koster anymore unless we can raise a great deal of money. The bane of this whole thing is that the most interesting and important site that I've discovered in 21 years of excavating here in the state of Illinois is that it has now become the most difficult site to dig, not because of technical reasons, but because of financial reasons. And I'm beside myself because if we go any deeper, we're going to endanger those students. Those walls are freestanding, and they could fall in and kill people. So that we got to put a bracing system or support system there, and it's going to cost a great deal of money, way more than archaeologists normally deal with. And so,
And what happens if you can't? You have to
we'll cover it over. I won't dig there anymore. I can't dig there anymore.
and that would all be lost then.
It would be lost. It would sit there until some archaeologists finally could put together necessary funds. But we wouldn't do any more work. We can't do any more work there until we do that.
Well, we certainly wish you luck in raising the funds and getting underground. We've been talking with Dr. Stuart Struever of Northwestern University, and now back to Frank McGee in New York.